So we mentioned in a previous video about the different types of movement, the gross, the complex, and the fine motor movements. Now, depending on what type of movement you're doing, depends on where most of the movement is going to occur in the zones. However, all zone movement originates and starts at zone 1. So if we think of a gross movement, like I said before, arm lifting up, or I'm just lifting my hand above my head. I'm really surprised I didn't punch that lampshade, something I normally do. So this, not a very complex movement, doesn't require a lot of thought, there's not a lot of working parts to it. It's definitely not a fine motor skill, it's not like writing or typing or navigating a website on my computer, it's just the whole limb going up, which is good. Because as I move from zone 1 pulls up zone 2 pushes up zone 3, and then I can reach. It's important. That means that this, or even this movement here, okay, means that the movement is coming from zone 1. Nice and stable. However, if I was to move from zone 3, okay, I have all of the weight of this arm pulling my shoulder forward. Not a good look, okay? It also means, if we look at it a bit closer, if I'm moving from here, doing this, look at all these poor bits of tissue getting pulled around, okay? We want to be moving from here. So a gross movement such as lifting your arm, definitely all you really need to think about is zone 1, up, when you're focusing on it during that cognitive phase. You're just pushing up, pushing from the shoulder up. So we've got a little bit of activation in the shoulder blade. Remember, you're not locking the shoulder blade, you're just giving it a little squeeze, a little, hey buddy, wake up. And then you're pushing your arm up. You're not pulling it. You see a lot of people when they're in the gym and they're doing shoulder press, okay? Especially if they're hypermobile, they move from here and they just pull up, which means the shoulder is essentially like this, okay? And then they finish the workout and they're like, oh, I don't really feel it in the muscles I was supposed to be working. I feel it deep in the shoulder. Well, I'm not really surprised because you weren't actually using these tissues. If you're doing a shoulder press or let's say a bench press, for example, this pec here, your muscle here, touches up here, it's pulling zone 2 to meet zone 1, okay? It's that movement. So if you're doing a bench press, that's what you're focused on, bringing them in. And if you just push your arms up at the same time, you'll see your hands stay perfectly in line with your elbow, okay? So the difference between moving from here and actually focusing on moving from zone 1 to push the chest together, okay? Like gross motor skill. So gross motor skills, the easiest movements are you're definitely moving from zone 1 for pretty much all of the movement, okay? Now, as we get into the complex and the fine motor movements, complex, being, let's say you're going to switch a light switch off, okay? That again is still a little bit of a gross movement, you're pushing your arm forward, but you need a little bit of movement here at zone 3 to be able to accurately hit the right position on the light switch. You indeed turn the light switch off, okay? So it's a little bit more of a complex movement. There's a few more working parts of that movement. So again, the movement is still going to originate from zone 3. Stabilize, pushing the joint forward, stabilize, stabilize, and then if you need to readjust anything, you got the movement here, okay? So whilst a lot of the movement comes from zone 3, it still starts at zone 1. Now, let's look at, say, turning our head. That's a really good one. So turning our head, okay, zone 1 really is here, okay? So this thoracic spine that our cervical spine sits on. So this will be zone 1, my cervical spine will be zone 2, and then right at the back, my first cervical vertebra, okay, my atlas, that is going to be my zone 3. Now, this is important because you'll see a lot of people with hypermobility, when they turn their head, they'll move from zone 3 and they'll pull all of the other zones with them, okay? Zone 3 is pulling zone 2. And you know what? I'm going to get Bertie to help represent this. A lot of people wonder why I have a little angry turtle up here. It's for moments like this when we're on Zoom with clients, okay? Think about the anatomy of Bertie here, okay? He's not like me. He doesn't have his head in this and he doesn't have a little atlas to be able to rotate properly, okay? Instead, what Bertie does is he does lateral flexion, essentially. He does flexion like this to move his neck. And that's important, okay? Because a lot of people with hypermobility, when they turn their head, especially if they've got, remember, posture's not all that important, but with hypermobility, it makes, you kind of want your joints to stack. So if I'm nice and tall, or if, let's say, for instance, I've got a bit of a forward head, okay, if it ain't straight, it ain't gonna rotate, okay? I need t-shirts with that on it because I say it so much, but it's true, okay? Look at my thoracic spine. If it's straight, look how much I can rotate. If it's flexed, oh, stiff. I can't really rotate that well. So if my head is in this position, okay, I'm not gonna be, Jesus, actually, that's not a lot at all. But if I come up, I can rotate far further. So if I'm here, and I've got all my tension and all my stability held here by the atlas, right, with things pulling out that aren't supposed to be pulling out, then the only way I can turn my head is to use all of these neck lateral flexor muscles here, okay, to help me flex my neck, which means, really, zone 3 isn't being used. It's zone 2. Zone 2 and zone 3 kind of lock together and we get this big, fat movement, okay? That's not how we should be moving. When somebody says, Adam, I stabilize, my cervical spine stabilizes, and then my skull and my atlas rotate to allow me to turn and say yes. Okay, that's important. So whilst we still originate the movement from zone 1, because this is stabilizing, and then the majority of the movement is being moved here. Because if not, we're just doing lateral flexion. And these muscles here are going to get really pissed off because they're doing a job that they're not supposed to be. A little bit like me. If you make me do a job that I'm not supposed to be doing, or in fact getting paid for, I am going to be a bit grumpy, okay? So these different types of zone movement are really important because they're not all created equally. The more complex a movement, the more you're going to move from zone 3, okay? But it means you still need to stabilize from zone 1, okay? That's the important takeaway to this part. If I'm writing, I stabilize, then the movement can happen in zone 3. What I don't want to do is just be moving zone 3, pulling this humeral head around in my shoulder joint, because it's not going to end well for me, okay? So the takeaway from this video is the more complex a movement, complex defined movements, okay, the more the movement is going to move from zone 3, which means you really need to focus on stabilizing zone 1 and before you do the movement, okay? That's the takeaway from this section.